Meeting to order. So let's have a roll call.
Archana Aliar.
Here.
Kyle Niederman.
Here.
Lisa Roman.
Here.
John Maston.
Here.
Eric Moran.
Here. Let's take a moment of silent prayer and private reflection. Will everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right, next up is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve the agenda.
And I'll second.
Kyle Niederman.
Yes.
Lisa Roman.
Yes.
Archana Aliar.
Yes.
Eric Moran.
Yes.
John Maston.
Yes.
So we're to our discussion items. 3.1 Human Resources, first presentation review of policy GCBA.
Mr. President, members of the board, Policy GCBA, professional staff salary schedules, includes a stipend for critical, difficult to fill positions. In our current climate, critical and difficult to fill positions is an ever-changing target. In the past, mathematics, science, special education, and gifted and talented were the primary positions that were difficult to fill. We are finding that while those areas are still sometimes hard to fill, there are other essential areas we are unable to recruit and hire. The proposed change to this policy would no longer limit the critical and difficult to fill positions, but allow the district to annually determine the areas of critical need. This will support our ability to respond more timely to the changing climate and attract quality candidates.
Do we have any discussion?
What causes this change?
I think we're finding nationally there are shortages in teachers, and it used to be in those really technical fields of math, science, special education, gifted and talented. That's just simply not the case anymore. This past school year, for whatever reason, a general 6th grade teacher was very difficult to find. Sometimes it's based on age group. Sometimes it is a specific content area, such as our CTE engineering sciences position. That has remained open for a year. It's just an ever-changing target. In the past, we used to have quite a few English teachers available, but right now we're struggling to find English teachers at the high school level as well.
So if I understand this correctly, this is something that's caused by the national shortage of teachers?
Yes, and just the current climate. We just faced the Great Resignation. I hate to say it, but it's probably not over. People are no longer staying in positions for 20, 30 years. They're on to the next position where they can earn higher pay.
Then I would move we approve it.
Just a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. Just first, I think it's a good idea to make this more of a living document. My main questions are kind of how are we determining this? This is going to be a process that once a year. Does it come before the board? Where will this, once we decide on what these areas are, where will that be published?
And I know we are in discussion at the director level in determining procedures and guidelines to annually define what are the critical, hard to fill positions. And then, of course, we would want that to be transparent and posted publicly on the Human Resources page where we do advertise our positions, but then as well as these supplemental stipends. By our second reading, I would like to have more information for you on that. I am working with some other districts to see how they annually define that. Would you like to see the policy language? You
Is
have
it the
that?
policy language that's in the PDF?
Yes.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
the proposed change.
So at this time, this is a discussion item, so it's not
Correct.
something we need to have a vote on right now, is it?
Just the first reading, yes.
Yes, it's the first reading. So I think I think we're looking, you stop me if I'm paraphrasing or anything.
I will withdraw my motion.
Okay, no worries. I think we're happy that this change is coming. We would just want to make sure that we can see the policies and procedures. And second reading would be a great time to hear all of those.
Great.
Are we done with discussion for 3.1? Let's move on to the action items. 4.1, Superintendent, fiscal year 2023 compensation package.
Members of the board. Before I pass this over to Mr. Murray, I just want to thank him and his team. This is always a time of year that comes with a lot of concern for each and every person that works in this district, and making sure we are doing the most fiscally responsible things with our dollars to ensure our staff is taken care of in the best manner that we can, while making sure that it is in a sustainable way. So I want to thank Mr. Murray, leading the budget committee, leading his own team, and looking at all those options and addressing those things. And he will take over at this time with the agenda item and a presentation.
Mr. President, members of the board, the compensation proposal for 2022-2023 provides the following. For salary, a base salary increase of 7% for certified staff. It's calculated from this year's fiscal 22 base pay. An hourly increase of $1.35 or 7%, whichever is greater, for classified staff, again calculated from fiscal year 22 base pay. Benefits, the annual employee-only medical benefit premiums will increase from $9,578.88 to approximately $10,057.32. The EPO or high deductible health plans are still available for employees and their qualified dependents. If an employee elects the high deductible health plan, the district will contribute $607.68 to the employee's personal health savings account, provided the employee establishes an HSA account. Detail of district and employee contributions will be included in the presentation that I'll show you. And just for your information, the $607.68, it's the difference between the high deductible health plan premium and the EPO premium. So if a staff member elects the EPO premium or the EPO coverage, that is a little bit more expensive than the high deductible health plan. So because we do pay 100% of our employee-only premiums, the difference between those two, we give that to the employee who elects the high deductible health plan so they can deposit that as mentioned in their HSA account. For athletic fees, we're going to maintain the current athletic participation fees. Additional compensation includes classroom site funds or Prop 301 funds. We're going to continue with a $2,000 carve-out or set-aside that will be divided up and distributed in to eligible certified staff's biweekly pay. It's approximately 22 pays that will be distributed amongst. $106.25 per 301 eligible employee per month, or $1,275 annually to be withheld to supplement the insurance premiums. That's a continuation of what we've been doing here for quite some time. Remaining funds received or deposited in the classroom site fund will be distributed in June to eligible certified staff in alignment with state statute and district policy or board action. And funds remaining after allocations become part of the overall carry forward for the district's respective classroom site fund category. And it's to be used in the next fiscal year for the benefit of all eligible 301 eligible certified staff. Salary and benefit proposals were discussed through a district budget committee comprised of administrators, certified and classified staff, as well as appointed governing board members. And the committee met on March 2nd and March 23rd. And the backup to this item was provided to you prior to this meeting. And what I'll share with you is the presentation, the slides that were shown and shared at the budget committee, the last budget committee meeting that we had. I did retitle this slide though, obviously, because it's appropriate for this meeting. I started, as I do pretty much every year, reminding the committee of perspective. As we sit on a budget committee, it's really easy to look at that right side of the screen and have a very close-up view, nearsighted view of what is beneficial to you as the employee. But then I also remind that we sometimes need to take a step back and look at the high-level view, that 30,000-foot view of how our decisions and our conversations impact the entire district. So it's very important to have both perspectives. Sharing just the overall timeline for the override, we are planning for right now for fiscal year 23. That is year 6 of the override, and you can see that this is the wind down phase where this next fiscal year will be at 2/3 funding for the override, which will receive approximately $3 million for that wind down. That's approximately 2/3 of the $4.5 million that we received, $4.8 million. Shared enrollment trends. So we looked at basically pre-pandemic, FY20, going through the pandemic in 21, and then our current reality in this fiscal year of 22. And you can see how just in pre-pandemic times, or right there in the middle of, as the pandemic started in the spring of 20, that we were at roughly 6,900 weighted student count. Fiscal 21, you can see that it declined several hundred students. And then now in fiscal year 22, we're back on track, pretty close to where we were pre-pandemic, just off by a handful of kids, 20 kids or so. So we have recovered them. They've come back, and that's a good thing, so that we are kind of back to where we started and hopefully continuing to grow. I shared the finance update at the time. We delayed the committee this year by several weeks because there were a few unknowns, one of which is the aggregate expenditure limit, which was a big topic of conversation for a while as to whether or not the legislature will approve that overriding that limit. Because if they did not, we were staring at roughly $6.2 million in budget reductions for this current fiscal year. So there were just some unknowns not too long ago, just several weeks ago. They finally resolved this. The other delay was the fact that our EBT annual meeting, the benefits meeting, wasn't until the end of February. So that's a pretty important meeting to have prior to budget committee, so that we know what our premiums will look like going into the next fiscal year. So that's why we started this process in early March rather than late January. Additional revenue possibilities we spoke of, the fact that we should be receiving a 2% inflation increase based on all the information that we've received thus far going into next fiscal year. Obviously that hasn't been completely established yet, but it should be a given that we receive 2% from 2% inflation funding to our base support level. That would generate roughly $600,000 should we continue with our enrollment the way it is currently. The benefit slide, this was shared with the committee. The actuary recommendation in that February annual benefit trust meeting was minimum funding at 6.9% increase with a recommended funding at 9.6%. The trustees elected to go the 7% route. I think they rounded it to 7% to just make it easy. So the minimum funding was the recommendation. You can see this is a portion of the information that we received from the trust, showing what premiums look like for each of the categories, employee only, employee spouse, and so on. And it also shows the comparison between this fiscal year and next fiscal year. You can see the increase. This is a summary slide that the trust gave us as well to show just the changes in benefits. So you can see there are very few changes to benefits, even though they increased by roughly 7%. They kept things pretty much the same. There are some deductible increases, copay increases, but other than that, Teladoc is going to be eliminated. Blue Care Anywhere offers the same type of service, telemedicine, all included in the Blue Cross Blue Shield price that we're already paying for. So rather than have two telemedicine services, Teladoc being one that we would actually have to pay for above and beyond what we already are with Blue Cross, the decision was made to just go with the one that we're currently paying for. So this current year was a year where we had both to try to help people transition from the one to the other, to help them make that adjustment. You can see a rate pass for dental and vision. Those rates stayed the same. These two slides, this is what was referred to in the action item of just having the district and employee contributions included in the presentation. So again, the committee has these. It just simply shows that for the high deductible health plan, these are the premiums. If you have dependent coverage, you can see what the district will contribute on your behalf, and also what the employee would contribute for the dependent coverages. And it's broken out into two categories, or into two columns, 24 pay and 18 pay. It just depends on what the employee elects. This is the same slide, just with a different set of numbers for the EPO plan. And it allows the district and the employee to see what would be contributed on their behalf, as well as what they would have to contribute for dependent care coverage. This is a slide that just gives a historical view of 301 funds from all the way back for 2006, 2007 to present. This fiscal year, you'll recall this time last year when we were before you, that we eliminated the 3 payouts. We used to pay out 301 3 times per year. This year, we elected to give the $2,000 carve out, like we're proposing again for next year, so that classroom site fund eligible teachers or staff take that $3,000, and it's divided biweekly in their pay, so they get a little bit of money throughout the year. And then, as mentioned in the action item, on June 30th, we'll true up, and whatever has been given to us by the state, we'll reconcile at that point and pay out everything that we've received year to date to the employees on June 30th. So that payout will be much larger. You can see over the years, teachers have received roughly $7,000 to $8,000 in 301. I don't see that being any different for this year. So with the $2,000 payout throughout the year, we're probably looking at $4,000 to $5,000 additional, because there is that set aside of $1,275 for premium subsidies for their benefits. This time last year, this is the proposal that came before you. So for this fiscal year that we're currently in, the board approved a $1,000 base increase for employees who work 188 to 225 days, and a $1,200 base increase for those who work 226 to 261, basically your year-round employee. Classified staff members or hourly staff received a 40 cent per hour base increase for this fiscal year. We had the COLA one-time amount of 4.5% of their current year base salary plus the previous year's COLA. And then this time last year, but for this fiscal year, the board approved a subsidy for retirees because ASRS no longer subsidizes premium benefits for our retirees or any entity's retirees if the group already subsidizes their plan. So because we pay 70% of the retirees' medical premiums, ASRS does not provide an additional subsidy on top of that. That was all new. We found this out last year or 18 months ago. And so that's why we pivoted to this, to provide some type of a phase down so that retirees could budget and plan ahead, and knowing that that subsidy would no longer be. So the district contributed this year the $150 subsidy and the $110 additional if you have dependents. In fiscal year 23, you'll see this on the recommendation slide coming up, that it would move down to $75 a month for retiree only. And if they have dependents, it would be an additional $55 per month subsidy that the district will pay to help lower that cost. So the budget consideration slide was presented. This was presented after the first meeting for the committee to consider. Again, just some talking points, some points to ponder. So we basically threw out there, what will classroom site fund distribution look like? Will we continue to divide it bi-weekly, the $2,000 like we're doing right now currently in this fiscal year? Something for them to consider. We considered just a base increase. We considered just a percentage increase. We considered a base and a percentage increase. We pondered the future of COLA. That was something that they were charged with. What does COLA look like for the future? And hard to fill was also something for us to all consider. If we have hard to fill positions like bus drivers or other jobs within the district and responsibilities that are just extremely hard to fill, not just here but throughout the state and the nation, do we look to increase those specific jobs by a certain dollar amount and be very specific and targeted? And then we talked about what is sustainable. The reality is we have carry forward, and that's a good thing. We are in a very good spot. Carry forward is a fancy word for savings. So whatever we don't spend from one year, it rolls forward to the next. So it's just like in our own household budgets. If we make so much money in the year and we don't spend all of that money that we receive, we have hopefully savings for future. There will be, right now currently, there's a little over $8 million in carry forward. You'll recall that the LHS EBT, the EBT that the district had as the sole EBT for the district, we had approximately $4 million in unused funds. So the process has already started to transfer those funds to the district to credit our current premiums that we're paying out now by using those funds. So what that's going to do, and we just did a journal entry a week ago of about $1.3 million. What that's doing is we are decreasing on our books, we're decreasing the expenditures for benefits by 1.3 million, and then we're taking the cash that's sitting in that account and depositing it with the county to show the decrease, which will then provide us with additional savings and carry forward. So as we decrease expenditures and we have this budget capacity, it allows us to generate savings, and that's what we're doing. So when all of this is done, I would say that we'll have approximately $10 million in carry forward after the $4 million transfer completely, maybe closer to 11. Just depends on what happens in other parts of the district between now and when that finally finishes. That'll carry forward into next year, where we'll continue to credit back expenditures. We started this process starting in October when the EBT officially closed. So from October to whenever we run out of $4 million, we'll continue to do to issue those credits to our expenditures and generate that savings. So that was something that we talked about. What is sustainable? Using savings is not the textbook example of sustainability, but with a short and long-term plan, it very well could be, pending what the state does in the future. And then approximately $300,000 increase to our benefit premiums for next fiscal year. That was a result of the previous slides and the 7% increase to our benefits. So that's going to be an additional $300,000 expense to the district. So then on this slide, I pivoted to an Excel spreadsheet and displayed that, and there were many, many scenarios. Those who were board representation at the committee meeting could see that there were several different scenarios to present to both certified and classified staff. So a summary of that is here on this screen. So for certified staff, there was a tab that showed a 5% base salary increase scenario that would cost the district roughly $810,000 for certified staff. And then there was a 6% scenario. Then you can see in green, there were 3 different scenarios that generated enough increase in base pay so that you can see down below that column in the red, blue, and green of what we were trying to accomplish. So the number that we were trying to hit as administrators was 39,000 so that we can start our new teachers at $39,000. Currently, they're at 37. So if we want to increase that to 39,000 to make it a little bit more easier for HR and our building principals and supervisors who are or building principals who are trying to get staff to come into our buildings and district and to hire them, we're completely aware that we have to be a little bit more competitive or continue to increase our salaries to be competitive. 39,000 is still, I wouldn't say that that's extremely competitive, but it is a step in the right direction. So the red 5% only got us to 38,350. If we proposed a 5% increase, that didn't help us hit our target. The 6% increase would only get us to 38,720. Again, we fall short of the target of 39,000, but any one of those 3 in green would actually allow us to start our beginning teachers at 39,000 and not have any type of compression or inversion for those who are already with us. The same is true on the classified side of things. 75 cents really wouldn't move the needle very much at all. A $1.10 increase or a $1.10 an hour or 7% would definitely be a pretty good increase for an hourly employee. However, when we're talking entry pay for certain jobs and job duties, we're trying to also increase that to be more competitive. We are mindful of, and I have a slide coming up here, we're mindful of the world around us and our competition. When you can go to a fast food restaurant or a fast food restaurant and make $15 an hour, it's kind of hard to attract someone here at the district making 13. So we're mindful of that, but we're not always going to be able to compete with the private sector. Sometimes they have a disadvantage or an advantage that we don't have, but we can try to be competitive as possible. And then the $1.35 example, again, just trying to increase that wage to not only honor our employees and try to help them to be as competitive or have a salary that's somewhat competitive to the private sector. Again, we fall short. We recognize that and realize that. But we also pay 100% in benefits, and we're paying $10,000 per employee for 100% medical, dental, and vision and life. So we're trying to be as competitive with the monies that we're given. And I added that black box down there where an update is. I've been working with Lindsay in HR regarding new hires and where they would be placed on the initial pay scale. She continues to work and look at that and review it to ensure that we do our best to avoid inversion and compression. So at this particular point, we can't really say that entry pay will increase by $1.10 an hour or whatever it may be, but we are extremely focused on trying to inflate that as much as we can without hurting our current staff. So that is still in the works. But all of these dollar amounts that you see here would be definitely affecting our returning staff members. And it would benefit our new staff as well. So again, for conversation, so basically looking at this slide and then giving some examples of what that actually looks like. You can see for certified staff, if we went with the 5% example, what that would do to a beginning teacher making $37,000 a year versus a veteran teacher who's making more than that. Now, I will note that there are very few teachers in that $58,000 range when it comes to base pay. Most of our staff are in the 40,000 range, from everywhere from low to mids and up to the higher level of 40,000. And you can see what that looks like for each of those examples: 6%, 1,000 plus 4%, 2,000 plus 2%, or 7%. And the reason why that's there is just to really show people that sometimes what we do benefits those who are at the bottom end of the pay scale, and sometimes there are scenarios that benefit those who are at the upper end of the pay scale, and sometimes there are those scenarios that benefit everybody across the pay scale. So it's just really trying to provide different scenarios of what our increase could do to our staff members. And the far right side is just an example that $1.10 or 7%, roughly, that if you make $15.70 an hour, that's the tipping point between when you would transition from either the $1.10 increase or the 7%, whichever is higher. So when you get to the $15.77 mark, you benefit $15.77 and above, you benefit with the 7% increase. You would make more than the $1.10 an hour increase. Anything below that, you would make the $1.10 an hour increase. So the next step we talked about was board recommendation. So one more slide after this. So budget planning and recommendation considerations. So in this process, recruitment and retention of staff, attempting to stay competitive with the job market, as I already said, has been a major, major, major focus. Cost of living was something that we were constantly talking about. I think about that all the time. Recruitment, retention, cost of living. I'm mindful, and I say it fairly often, that I'm mindful of every employee, and our administration team the same. We know that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who are trying to make an honest living and work hard and get paid for what they do, and they have families and obligations. They have things that they're trying to take care of in their own personal lives and supporting families. So cost of living is on our mind. Housing locally is a big concern. There was a time where our local paper was running, they were running housing articles, and they had stories every day for, like, I want to say like 2 weeks, it seems like it, maybe even more than that, where they were talking about workforce housing, and they were comparing all different areas and what that looks like. So we're mindful of the fact that where we live, the cost to rent or purchase is on the very high side. Goods and services, not just here but around the world, especially in this country, inflation is happening. I ran numbers, looked at reports, so inflation is approximately 7.9% currently. I think the next inflation report comes out in April, but currently it was 7.9%. We noted that Social Security had a cost of living increase of 5.9%. And then in further studies and looking at it, from what I can see, they're speculating that in fiscal year 23, now I'm not the federal government, but from what I could see and what people are reporting on, that they're speculating that Social Security increases could even be 7.6% in fiscal year 23. So we're looking at everything around us and trying to make sure that our decisions are in line with our current realities. Again, in the budget planning and board considerations, do we continue to pay 100% of our medical premiums for employees? That is something that at present it'll be very difficult to pivot from in the moment, especially with our current climate. Something drastic change like that, in my opinion, would be too drastic right now to even go there. We just want to recruit and retain people right now. Increasing our biweekly base pay versus a one-time cost of living adjustment. Do we do something that is more long-term and money in your biweekly check versus the COLA that we proposed a number of years ago, where that is just given in 2 lump sums? And the reason why we did that is because A, we have an override that sunsets, and that's very difficult to try to budget long-term when you have a pot of money that comes and goes, and it's only there based on voter approval. So we had this COLA, cost of living adjustment, that we gave to employees, and that was a percentage of their salary, and we split it in half and distributed it twice a year. So that way it wasn't sustainable or it wasn't something that was there and they counted on every 2 weeks in their check. So that was something that we considered as well. Do we increase the base pay so that we can give people money throughout the year, every 2 weeks, or do we continue down the road of cost of living adjustments where they only get lump sums twice a year? And then the last one, addressing both beginning and veteran staff salaries, as we saw on the slide just before this.
Have we got Steve Greeley involved in this?
So those conversations have occurred, and yes, so we've reached out to the old PAC,
Yeah,
and those conversations are still ongoing.
good, because they should be involved in this if we're going to get that override reapproved.
And one of the things they're kind of working on right now is the fact that we are going through a governor's race. To really talk to all those gubernatorial candidates, to ask them what's their plan for really addressing this at a state level. Because they do have that opportunity and they're starting those conversations now. And it would be great if we never had to ask our community for more than they already give. They're very generous to us. So we're kind of hopeful that conversations with those candidates might help as well.
That would help a lot.
To see what the
So we will continue, as Dr. Stone said, that we will continue to have those conversations, and the timeline of that is still to be determined as to where our next step will be in regards to going out for an override renewal. So that leads us to the last slide. So the the board recommendation before you tonight for fiscal year 23. It's recommended that certified staff receive a 7% base salary increase calculated from this year's FY22 base salary. That would start teacher pay in FY23 at $39,000. That would be step 1 on the initial placement schedule. Classified and hourly support staff to receive $1.35 an hour rate increase, or 7%, whichever is greater. Now you'll note that or 7% was not on one of the other options we discussed. The $1.10 an hour or 7% was, but we did add the 7% to the $1.35 an hour option because we do have staff members, and some of them are extremely hard to fill. When you get into specialty services, craft services, technicians, they make above $15 an hour. And when your labor force and your competition around town is paying your HVAC techs and plumbers and computer techs and mechanics, they do quite well out in the private sector. So for us to get even to a point where we can throw a rock at them, we need to look at the 7% option to help them out as well, to get them closer to what market value would be for them.
I have a tech that I just talked about his pay with. He's going to $22 an hour. So computer techs get paid.
They do. And they have a technical skill set that makes them highly attractive.
Yes.
So that was the purpose of adding the 7% onto that $1.35 an hour increase. So the ongoing cost approximately $1.7 million to pivot to that. Now again, that includes the full 7%. We're mindful that COLA, we were paying roughly $1.2 million for our COLA adjustments alone. So if you took 4.5% of what we were giving out this year for COLA, and you add another 2.5% to that, that's what gets us to the 7% base salary increase. Again, moving away from something that was given only 2 times a year to something that's in our checks every 2 weeks. That's the base salary increase. And then you'll notice on the right side of the screen, as I was referring to earlier, that bar just went down to FY23 to show that we're recommending that we phase down that retiree subsidy to include the district contributing $75 a month for retirees. This is on top of the 70% that we already pay. But an additional $75 a month to help phase out that ASRS subsidy. And then if the retiree has dependents, whether it's one dependent or many dependents, they get another $55 regardless if it's one or many. Just $55 flat per month for dependent coverage. Any questions?
Discussion. One thing that I would just like to see if you could add to the discussion, because you were very much talking about the sustainability of this long term. Could you kind of tell us kind of what those conversations were for the folks that weren't on the
Sure. So
on the committee?
I stressed a number of times that I'm comfortable that this is sustainable for 3 to 5 years. That's if the state does absolutely nothing over the next 3 to 5 years. We have enough in carry forward, and that also is dependent on that the sky doesn't fall upon the district and we have some out of control liability claims or something like that forces us to now pay out for something that is unforeseen. So I'm comfortable that 3 to 5 years, and I say 3 to 5 years because I'm trying to be conservative in that. I believe if things continue to go as they are now and everybody behaves and the world shines favorably on the district, that we're more at the five-year sustainability for that. Again, pending the state doesn't do anything. And right now there's a few different proposals out there, and we're just waiting to see what happens, where the dust settles. There could be action that takes place where it's benefit to us. There's a benefit to us in the more immediate future. But then there could be some things that also make it to where our capital needs, like for a bond or a future override, is limited or non-existent. So there are some options that we may get a smaller but definitely welcomed increase. But then it also could heavily restrict us in the future as to how we address our capital needs. A bond right now allows us to complete major renovation projects as well as small projects. And that is extremely a major blessing for the district to be able to have access to those types of funds so that we can improve our work conditions and our facilities. Some of these proposals that we're seeing may take that away. And from what I'm currently seeing, I don't see that the increase that they're willing to give us as a trade-off for that would benefit any district long term. Because if you're only getting and I'm going to say only, and to me it's a lot of money, if you're getting $1 million a year additional, but then you lose capacity to have $40 million in an override 10, 20 years down the road from now, that's not that great. I mean, $1 million, that's 40 years of $1 million, where a $40 million override can definitely help you immediately. and take care and address your immediate needs. An override, 15% override, where we receive a little over $4 million a year, that's fully funded for 5 years, that's $20 million. If the proposal is an additional $1 million from the state, that's 20 years. It would take 20 years for them-ish, and I'm just using easy math, 20 years for them to catch up to what we could have in an override. So I just don't know. There's just so many unknowns. I try to take the conservative route in trying to have the discussion of sustainability. I've been here long enough to have friends of mine who were out on that street very unhappy with conditions in a number of years ago. And sometimes that's no fault of the person sitting in this room and in this seat, because there's so many unknowns with what the state is willing to propose and put out there. I don't envy the person who I replaced, because I know that person had a very difficult job, and I don't envy the person who comes after me at whatever point that is, because it's a constant moving target, and we're just trying to do what's right for people, and trying to have just trying to pay the bills so we don't have to take it away from them later on. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
So
Very
3 to
much.
5 years sustainability, I'll say that one more time.
Yeah, and I think that's, the reason why I wanted to bring that up is it's kind of a very important point at where we are, I think, with the district. We've been through a couple of tough years. We have some tough questions coming up, but we're at a place where we've been very conservative in the last few years. But now we have this opportunity to, I think, do a shot in the arm for our employees and help them to deal with some of the issues that have been happening over the last few years, a lot of the financial issues and things like that. I'm very comfortable with that 3 to 5. I know in the meeting, everybody was joking about, is it 5? You're like, I think it's 5, but I'm not going to say 5. It's 3. You're a very conservative budget manager, and I think that gives us confidence to kind of say, hey, or it gives me confidence, I should say, to say this is something that we can do, and watch policy, watch what the government is doing, get opportunities as we go, whether they're applying for grants or doing everything, or meeting with the community about an override, whatever those things would come up. It gives us some time to do that and also give everybody a shot in the arm. So I appreciate that. Any other comments? So this is an action item, so I will take a motion.
I will move that we pass it as presented.
I will second.
Lisa Roman,
Yes.
John Maston,
Yes.
Archana Aliyar,
Yes.
Kyle Niederman,
Yes.
Eric Grant,
Yes. Announcements, any announcements? Yes. Then I will take a motion to adjourn.
I would move we adjourn.
I'll second.
John Maston,
Yes.
Lisa Roman,
Yes.
Kyle Niederman,
Yes.
Archana Aliyar,
Yes.
Eric Grant,
Yes, we are adjourned.